Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in for our webinar presentation this month. Today, we are taking a look at the essential balancing practices inside RoomKey. So let's go ahead and get started. The outline for today's presentation will start with some introductions. We'll dive right into our topic. What is essential balancing? How is it used? Why do we do it? We'll talk about how to do balance checks as part of that essential balancing process. Then we'll look at addressing issues that could occur in the database, things like overstayed and no-show reservations, unbalanced folios, and we'll also take an extra step to look at advanced troubleshooting when an imbalance is found and what you can do to resolve it. We'll wrap up our presentation with a summary and Q&A. So our introductions for today, my name is Tasha LeClaire. I am a trainer and implementation specialist with RoomKey. I'll be running today's presentation on screen and in demonstration. I will also oversee the Q&A and chat inside the webinar presentation. So everyone attending today's live presentation is on mute, but if you do have a question, go ahead and click that Q&A button in the Zoom meeting. You'll be able to ask a question. I can answer via text, or any questions that are not answered during the presentation, we'll use those for our summary and Q&A at the end. Couple more things about our webinar today. It is being recorded. You might have had that notification at the top of your screen. It is also a webinar survey issued after the webinar presentation to those of you attending the live presentation today. If you have any feedback for us, if you'd like to suggest topics for future webinars, that survey is a great resource, and we do appreciate any of your feedback there. So getting started with defining what is essential balancing, I do need to take a moment and just frame up this question and talk about how revenue flows inside RoomKey before we define essential balancing. So revenue flow in RoomKey is tracked based off of the guest reservation status. And we have 3 receivable accounts that we use to track revenue based on this status. So the first one is the AR guest account, and this is where revenue is collected while the guest is in-house. So when you post a room charge, it appears as a debit in the AR guest account. If you if you take payment for that room charge while the guest is in-house, that appears as a credit in the AR guest account. Now, this may be renamed in your database. It may be called guest or guest ledger or some variation of that, or a numerical code. Now, if you collect revenue before a guest arrives, things like an advance deposit or prepaid reservation, instead of crediting the AR guest account, that will actually go into deposit holdings, and that revenue is held for the guest checks in. Now, when the guest checks in, that deposit is transferred to the AR guest account. That happens automatically when the front desk agent clicks check-in for a reservation that has a prepayment or deposit on file. Now, for guests that are already in-house but are not paying for their own room and tax charges, those charges may be transferred to a city account on behalf of the organization or company that the guest is traveling with. This process may also be called direct bill. This is where guest room charges are owed after the guest has checked out. So we use a code called the city ledger transfer to transfer those charges to the AR city account. And that's where we can hold revenue owed to the hotel after the guest has checked out. So throughout the day, guests are checking in, checking out, we're taking payments and transferring charges. So revenue is constantly flowing in and out and transferring between these 3 accounts. And because of that, at the end of the day, we need to have a process to verify that the end of day balance or balance out of these 3 accounts is accurate. And that's where essential balancing comes in. This is our method of daily account reconciliation for those 3 receivable accounts listed here: deposit holdings, AR guest, and AR city. So a traditional method for verifying these accounts, the balance out at the end of the day, is using a single report called the Account Receivable Reconciliation Report. You can find that in the financial section of our reports menu. This Account Receivable Reconciliation Report, or ARR report, will have the opening balance and end of day or closing balance for each of these 3 accounts. Now, to verify each of these end of day balance or closing balance, you need to compare that to the corresponding report in RoomKey. So to verify the deposit holdings value balance out, you'll compare that to the reservations with deposits. This is a report that is found in the deposit management section of the reports menu. To verify the AR guest balance out, you'll compare that with the daily balances for in-house guests, and that is a report found in our audit section. And lastly, to verify the AR city balance out, you'll compare that to the daily balances for city accounts report. That one too is also found in the audit section. Now, looking at this method, it does require that you source the account receivable reconciliation report first, and then 3 more reports after that. And that can be somewhat time consuming. So what we've done in RoomKey is actually combine the information from these 4 separate reports onto one single report, and that is called the Essential Balancing Report. This is found in the financial section of our reports menu, and you'll see that it will appear as a single line item, but it has values from 4 separate reports. So once again, those 4 separate reports back here, of course, the 3 values on top, deposit holdings, AR guest, and AR city, are all from one single report. So we have those values displayed in a single line item to make it easier to perform that essential balancing. Now, I will come back to this report because this is how we'll do our balance checks in our next topic. Before I leave our definition of essential balancing and why RoomKey is set up like this, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about a couple more features that make RoomKey unique. So when you compare to other property management software, they do also have these 3 accounts, some sort of method for tracking revenue based off of the guest reservation status. And most PMS that do have this type of tracking for their accounting purposes, they will require that at every day you need to manually roll the date, usually at the same time every day. And that's a physical, usually a button that says end of day or close date at the bottom there. But in the event that there's an issue with any of the accounts or this manual roll the date process, this can take some time depending on the management software. So it actually prevents you from doing any activities at that time. Now, one of the benefits of having this process of manually rolling the date is that it allows guests that arrive late after midnight. It allows the front desk agent or night auditor to check those guests in and post the room and tax, have the room and tax post to the previous day. They must do that. That is the default, or that's the setting that will occur. And then they roll the date, and then it is the new date. So it does require some of that information, but it is a benefit because it does allow for late arrivals after midnight. Now in RoomKey, we do accommodate for this, and we actually make the process a little bit quicker too, because we don't require any sort of end of day sequence. You don't need to manually push a button in RoomKey. We don't auto print reports or reams of paper or anything like that every night. Instead, what we do have is a setting called the rollover setting. Now, this is used for any properties that have a 24-hour front desk, where they do want to have that benefit of being able to check in a guest if they arrive late sometime after midnight. That allows the front desk or night auditor to check the guest into the previous day. So that's the rollover setting inside RoomKey. And like I said, this is for the benefit of hotels with a 24-hour front desk. If your hotel closes the front desk overnight, RoomKey will roll the date automatically at midnight. Right. So for this rollover setting, I do have a video here. It's a little bit longer, it's about 4 minutes, but it's going to show us some key demonstrations. First, it's going to show you how to set up the rollover setting in RoomKey, where that setting is found. And then it's going to show us what it looks like when you check in a guest between midnight and the rollover time, which I think in this example is going to be 3 a.m. So if a guest arrives between midnight and 3 a.m., what it looks like to check in a guest and have those charges post automatically. And then we also have a demonstration of what it looks like to check in a guest after that rollover time has passed. So let's take a look here. So this first video, we'll see how to set the rollover time in RoomKey. And in RoomKey, you'll go directly to System Configuration and select the Property module. When this opens up, you'll click the Rollover tab, which appears in the middle here. And you'll see that you can set a rollover allowed. You can set the time to automatically stop at 3 a.m. And don't forget to check the box on the right-hand corner to previous day by default. That will tell RoomKey to automatically post those charges to the previous day. When you click OK, that saves that setting. And now let's see what it looks like to check in a guest between midnight and 3 a.m. So it is 1 a.m. in the morning. And when you look at your arrivals, you'll see that there's no arrivals there. Instead, you'll find your arrivals in the no-show screen. Here we've got the guest Kelly Brookside, and I can click the check-in button. I can make sure I select a room that is in clean status, so it has a green icon next to the room number, and you follow your regular check-in procedures to go ahead and check in the guest. You'll see the guest is now in-house, and if I take a look at the guest folio, I can see that room and tax charge has automatically posted for the previous day. Now let's take a look at another example. This time a guest is going to arrive after rollover has passed, so this is 4 a.m. Again, the arrival does not appear in the arrival screen. It will appear in the no-show screen because it's after midnight. So we have this second guest arriving a little bit later. When you select the reservation and click check-in this time and follow your check-in procedures, you'll receive this notification letting you know the rollover time has passed, so you can no longer check them into the previous day. You will need to change their arrival date, so click the Change Res button, uncheck the book box. Now you need to change the arrival date to the current day, in this case November 8th, and you need to decrease the length of stay by 1, so making sure that the departure date remains November 10. Now you can click Refresh to update the availability in the calendar view. And you can also double check the rate, pricing, and reconfirm that with the guest. So the price is $220 per night. Now you need to recheck the book box in order to confirm those details we changed. You can also take a look at the guest info and update any information here if needed. Otherwise, you can click OK, and you'll now see that guest in the arrival screen, where you can now select check-in and check them in as if they were a regular arrival. So I'll just go ahead and click check-in. Now, because I changed the length of stay to 2 nights, if I take a look at the guest folio, I'll only see the room charge for the current night. I do need to manually post a charge for the previous room and tax for the previous night. So I'll make sure I'm selecting the room charge here, and in the amount field, I'll put in the price for the room charge, which was $220. And in the reference field, I do recommend you you reference the date. So in this case, this was for the previous night, the night of November 7. Now you can complete the process, go ahead and click OK Exit, and you'll see that second room charge now appear. So that reference information is for the guest benefit, so they are aware of why there are 2 room charges on the same night on November 8th. That way they know that it's for the previous night. Okay. So just a couple of things to go over because we do have a couple of unique settings in RoomKey, in particular that rollover setting. So now that we've looked at all of the components of essential balancing, let's take a look at the actual process. So this process is what we call balance checks, and just mention when we recommend you do these balance checks. For hotels that have a 24-hour front desk where you have a night auditor or night audit shift, we do recommend that the night auditor do the balance checks after rollover within about 30 minutes. So in that example we just saw with the rollover time at 3, I would recommend that the night auditor do these balance checks between 3 and 3:30 a.m. Now, if your front desk closes overnight, you would have an AM opening shift and a PM closing shift and no night auditor overnight. So in that case, what I do recommend is that the balance checks are performed by the AM or morning opening shift the following day. So let's take a look at what those balance checks are. And that's once again using this essential balancing report that you can find in the financial section of the reports menu. So balance check number 1 is going to look at 2 values on this report. We're going to compare the in-house guest balance out and compare that to the AR guest balance out. Now, when you do this comparison, you're going to take a look at the values themselves. If you see a plus or minus symbol in any of the values, you can ignore these for the purposes of these balance checks. So if I look at these 2 values, I can see that they match. So I know that my AR guest account is balanced. The next balance check number 2, is going to compare the city account balance out to the AR city balance out. And again, if you see any of those plus or minus symbols, you can ignore those and just look at the numerical value of those 2 accounts that appear on this report. They match, so I know my AR city account is balanced. The last balance check number 3, is going to compare the deposit detail to the deposit holdings balance out. And again, these 2 values match, so I know that the deposit holdings account is balanced. So with that information contained on this single report, I know that the revenue and occupancy numbers that are reported on my reports for this day will be accurate. Speaking of reports, the next thing that you are likely to do if you are the night auditor or AM shift who has just completed the balance checks here, the next thing you are likely to do is print off reporting for the management and admin staff. That is unique to each property, depending on what your business practices are and who you communicate with based off of these essential balancing reports. But we do have a recommendation for some key reports that you might want to add into that audit or end of day reporting. So here, right at the top, I do recommend that you include the essential balancing report. That, of course, is this one right here, found in the financial section. So report number 1, I would recommend including that. Reports 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the corresponding reports that appear on the essential balancing report number 1. One thing that I would like to note is report number 3, the reservations with deposit reports. This is a time-sensitive report that may have values change as guests check in or make deposits throughout the day. So that report is live. If you are a night auditor, I do recommend that you print at least report number 3 just after the rollover time and pass that on to your accounting team. If your accounting team does want to see that information at that time, that's a time-sensitive report that you need to print just after rollover, likely right after you do your essential balancing. Now, there are some other reports that are commonly recommended, part of our training that we do with all of our hotels. They are displayed off to the right-hand side here. We've got things like the transaction register balance report and the journal entry report. These are financial reports that can help you review the information on the account receivable reconciliation report. They also help you do auditing. So if you're auditing any sort of credit cards or POS postings in the system, you can use the transaction register balance to do those. A couple more reports include the property status or dashboard report and the daily operating report. These are statistical reports that will give you your some key metrics like occupancy and ADR. And if you'd like to know more about these additional reporting, we do have a reports webinar that we did earlier this year. Definitely check that out on our support website. The full recording is available for you to see. Most hotels, like I said, after you've confirmed your essential balancing, you will go ahead and print any of your required reports, and you can continue on with any regular duties for your shift. That represents the end of the essential balancing process. If you have gone through your essential balancing and your balance checks and you find that one or more of your balance checks finds your accounts out of balance, I do recommend that we fix those out of balances first before you print those recommended reports. So because out of balances can occur in a variety of ways, I'm going to start with recommending some steps that a night auditor or front desk agent can take to resolve out of balance common causes of out of balances. Then we'll take a look at some more advanced troubleshooting. So the first common cause of unbalanced folios can be overstayed or no-show reservations. I'm going to start with the overstayed reservations here. Overstayed reservations can affect your room inventory. It will continue to occupy that room, but room and tax will not post after the departure date. So what has happened here is that a guest was due to check out. They may or may not have left the property, but for whatever reason, the front desk agent did not check them out of the PMS. So what happens is that after midnight, an overstayed reservation will continue to occupy that room, so it'll take up that inventory. But because room and tax is no longer posting while it is in overstayed status, you're actually missing out on that revenue as well. So I do have a video here. It's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's going to show us some key features of how to find overstayed reservations and how to fix them. And then I have a little trick to show you at the end of the video as well. So let's take a look. So to find and fix overstayed reservations, one of the ways you'll find them here in the in-house screen is that they will appear with red coloring. So here it's written in red. If I take a look at the guest folio, they are originally due out on the 10th, and I can see room charges have only posted up to the 9th. So a quick way to find all of these is to click the date out, and that will show a little arrow here on that header, and that actually pushes all of those overstayed reservations to the top, where you can select the overstayed reservation and click checkout. So our recommendation is to always check out overstayed reservations as soon as you find them. So here I'm just taking payment for the outstanding charges, and it completed that checkout. Now here on the tape chart, you would also see overstayed reservations. They appear in red. And if you take a look at the legend, it'll show you what that red coloring means. So I know that this is an issue. If the guest is still in-house and I just want to change their stay, when you click change stay, it'll let you know that you must check it out. But I do have a little trick here. If you right-click on the reservation and click modify reservation in this menu, you now have the ability to click the show inventory rates and history. So this will actually allow you to manage the reservation. So you can uncheck the book box, click refresh. That will update for the additional nights that the guest has remained in-house or that overstayed status. You can take a look at the rate for those additional nights, so you can see that there's a rate change during their stay. You might just want to verify those new rate changes. Click the rate plan or select the rate plan checkbox and recheck the book checkbox. What this does is it retains all the guest information, but when we click OK, this is now going to change that from a overstayed to an in-house reservation. If I look at the details and the guest folio here, I can see those room charges have now posted for those previous dates automatically. So another common issue that can cause an imbalance in the system is if you have any unaddressed no-shows. These reservations also affect guest room inventory, and if they have a balance, if it's a prepaid reservation that no-showed or something like that, that will affect the deposit holdings account directly, because RoomKey doesn't know what to do with that deposit if the guest arrival date has already passed. So I have another video here that will show us what we can do to find any no-shows and how to go through and cancel those as a method of resolving any balances that are held in that deposit holdings account. So to find and cancel no-show reservations, in RoomKey, you'll find your no-shows in the no-show screen. Here, I can see that this is a prepaid reservation. It says so in the rate code. And if I look on the folio, I can see there's a prepayment. I do need to cancel this reservation and charge a cancellation fee because because it's a non-cancelable or non-refundable booking. So my reason that I'll select here is no show, and I'll click cancel and charge. You do have the option to view a cancellation confirmation. I'm just going to click no so that we can take a look at this folio now that the guest has or the reservation is canceled. Now I'm going to show you another method that's actually a quick way to cancel all no-shows from the transaction screen. You can select cancel all no-shows, and that will do that process for you. The only drawback with that second option, the quick way with canceling all no-shows all at once, is that it does not allow you to post any cancellation fees. So if there is deposit on file, it will cancel the reservation, but it will not modify that deposit. So that deposit will remain on that canceled reservation. So if you're a night auditor or front desk agent troubleshooting an imbalance on your essential balancing report, take a look at any overstayed or no-show reservations. Follow the steps we've looked at to fix those, and then you can run your essential balancing again to see if that brings your accounts back into balance. If they're not back in balance, the next thing that we can look at are unbalanced folios. And we have two methods or two possibilities with unbalanced folios. You could have a canceled reservation with a balance. This can occur if a reservation is canceled and maybe they had an advance deposit that was not refunded, or maybe the reservation was canceled and someone forgot to take payment for the cancellation fee. And then you could also have a checked out reservation with a balance. This one could occur if something was posted or refunded after the guest has checked out. In RoomKey, when you go through the checkout process for a guest, it does force the user to balance at the point of checkout. So if you have a guest that is checked out status but has a balance, you know that something happened after that guest checked out. So to find these types of occurrences in the database, we actually have a report that will allow us to find this information, whether it's canceled or checked out, and that is the Unbalanced Folio report. I'm just going to bring up RoomKey on screen so I can show you where this report is and how to use it. So in RoomKey, you're going to go to the Reports menu. In the Audit section, you'll select Unbalanced Folios. Now this report can be run for a date range, and as a rule of thumb, I like to recommend looking at this report for up to 1 year in the past. So I've got a date from and a date to that both show today's date. All I need to do is click on the year and change that back to 2022. There we go. You could also use this date picker to go back to November 2022 in that case and select the date that way. Either way, I do recommend that this is 1 year in the past. And when you click OK, RoomKey is going to look through all of the folios in the past year to see if there are any unbalanced folios. If I left the default date range as today's date, it would only look to see if there's any unbalanced folios for the current day. So that's why it is helpful to do it for up to 1 year in the past. If there are any unbalanced folios within that date range, they will appear here on a single report. It'll identify the res ID for the reservation, the room number if applicable. If it was a canceled reservation, it'll simply show canceled, like this one here. And then it shows the guest information and any balances that are outstanding. In this example, balances that appear on this report that are negative will be bracketed. So like this second line item here is negative $200. So I know that this database is out of balance, and I've got about 6 different unbalanced folios that are causing some of this confusion. Now, because they could be caused in different methods, it could be affecting both my deposit holdings as well as my AR guest account. So let me just close this report. And now I'm going to go through a couple of examples of how to fix what we saw on that report. So the first ones I'm going to address are the ones that are canceled with a balance. Because that report gives you the res ID, you can quickly search for the res ID. Let me just go to the search menu here. And the first reservation we'll look at is 2552. There we go. So this reservation is a canceled reservation. And if I take a look at the folio, I can see that a cancellation fee was posted, but there's no payment for that cancellation fee. So this folio is out of balance by a little over $200. So in order to resolve this, I'm going to take payment using the credit card on file for the guest. So here in the folio, I'll click Post Payment. It'll pull through the guest credit card information on file plus the outstanding amount. RoomKey recognizes that that's outstanding. So I can click OK, Exit, and that will now post and balance the folio back to 0. I'm looking at this value down at the bottom here. Now the next example we'll look at, let me go back and search here. The next res ID that was on that report is 2546. This one is also canceled. If I take a look at the folio, this one also has a cancellation fee, but I know that if I take a payment, try and take a payment like I did for the previous example, this credit card on file declines. So if I'm not able to collect payment from the guest for their cancellation fee, one thing that you can do is decide to reverse the cancellation fee, and that will bring the folio back to 0. So here I'll right click on the cancellation fee. I cannot collect payment for it, so I'll select reverse, and in the reason field, I'll say unable to collect payment and OK. So that will remove that cancellation and bring the folio back to 0 as well. I have one more example with those canceled folios. Oops. I go to the search. So we have our last canceled reservation here. If I go to the folio, I can see that there is a reservation deposit. Now, part of my investigation, if I find that I should refund the deposit instead of posting a cancellation fee, I can right-click, select Reverse, and this time, for the reason, I will say refunded per MOD or manager on duty. I'll select OK. And because I selected reverse, it actually removes the deposit completely. But if you wanted to see that deposit and the refunded payment, here in the folio section, you can go to folio 9, and it will show you the original reservation deposit and the reversal that we just did, including the refunding reason. So those are just some of the methods that you can use to fix any unbalanced folios that are represented by canceled reservations. Now let's take a look at the checked out reservations with a balance. And take a look at my next res ID, 2524. This is a checked out reservation. It's also a hidden rate, so it's prepaid. If I take a look at the folio, I can see that there is a damage fee on file. So this would have been posted after the guest checked out. And if I just expand this information here, I can see the full list. So I see that this was posted because the guest caused some damage in the room 402. If I take a look at the guest info, I do have a guest credit card on file, and the room and tax for this guest have already been transferred to the city ledger account, but this outstanding amount is still owed. So the travel company is not responsible for this payment. The guest is responsible for this payment. So when I click post payment, I want to make sure that it's the guest credit card information that's appearing here. And I also have that amount, that outstanding amount as well. So I can click OK, exit. That will process the payment with the guest visa, and it also balances the folio. Now that this is back in balance, I know that that will no longer appear on that unbalanced report. The next one we'll look at. Okay. This one here, if I take a look at the folio, I can see that there was an adjustment to the room charge after the guest checked out. So the guest checked out and paid with Visa, but I can see that after checkout, the front desk agent did make an adjustment of $50 off of the net room charge. So it's actually placed this folio out of balance by $56. In order to balance this folio, I will need to post payment. But what you'll see is that instead of so it does pull the guest credit card information, but it will post as a negative because I actually owe this money back to the guest credit card after I've adjusted part of the room charge. So I'll select OK, exit. That will post that refund back to the Visa. So I can see that that is a refund back to the Visa that we had on file for the guest. And we've brought the folio back into balance at $0. One last example here. There we go. Our last one here also checked out. And if I take a look at the folio, I can see that the guest stayed one night, checked out, we took a Visa payment, and then sometime after checkout, our housekeeping team let us know that the guest actually smoked in the room. So we've posted a smoking fee for this room 212. Now, this guest payment on file is a Visa credit card that we were able to use successfully, but this time when we take payment, when you click post payment, it does not approve, so it declines that credit card on file. If you are not able to collect payment for this charge, what you may need to do is actually reverse the smoking fee altogether. So similar to what we did with the cancellation fee on an earlier example, I will right click on this smoking fee, select reverse, and I'll say unable to collect payment. And OK. So that will remove the smoking fee because we can't collect payment, and it'll bring the folio back to $0. So I can see that's displayed at the bottom. So we've gone through quite a few examples, all 6 of them that we saw on that unbalanced folio report. When you go through and resolve all of those issues, we do recommend that you go and run the unbalanced folio report again for the same date range to verify that you've fixed all of the issues. So I'll do that same thing from the reports menu, audits. I'll select unbalanced folios. I'll change the date from back to last year, 2022. So I'm looking at 1 full year in the past, and select OK. Now, as this goes through and runs, it's going to look at all of those past unbalanced folios, just like it did the first time. Hopefully this time we get a different result because we've now resolved the issues. So this time, because there are no unbalanced folios in the database, instead of getting a report, I actually get a warning message. This may look a little scary, but it's actually good news. It tells me that there are no records to report. There are no issues in the system. Ideally, what I can do now is I might also want to verify from my financial section that the essential balancing report shows that I'm back in balance today before you go ahead and print additional reporting. Just getting back to our presentation there, the unbalanced folios, there is a lot of detail there, but I do like to show a couple of examples for each different business scenario. If you've gone through and fixed your unbalanced folios, but you find that you're still out of balance on that essential balancing report, we can now take a look at some advanced troubleshooting recommendations. So one of the first things that you need to find out in order to investigate or do advanced troubleshooting is define which account is out of balance. So from your essential balancing report, you can determine which accounts are out of balance and what is the out of balance value. So using this example report, I can look at the AR guest account and see that those two values do not match. The difference between them is $4.50. So I know that the AR guest account is out of balance. The AR city account is balanced. Those two values match. But when I get to the deposit holdings account, these two values do not match. So again, doing that difference calculation, I know that there's $103.95 out of balance on the deposit holdings account. So what I can do is I can take these out of balance values, let's just hold them up here in the top right corner, and I'm just going to see if I can find any values that correspond to these any transactions that correspond to those out of balance values on our transaction register balance report. So I could look through the amount and tax and total columns to see if any of these individual values or any of the total values match either the 450 or the 103.95 for the date that I go out of balance. So that is one method to advance your troubleshooting. If you do find any transactions that are causing an issue, you can try to fix it, or you can pass that information on to the next manager on duty. Now, because all of these steps so far have been at the level of a front desk or front desk user, the next set of troubleshooting may need to be performed by a manager on duty or part of the accounting team, because it does require some set permissions. So the next type of troubleshooting we'll look at is a transaction audit. And in order to audit the transaction codes, you must have permission 850 in order to access the transaction codes module. And this permission set is only available if you have an owner admin or accountant user role. So if you have a clerk user role, you would not be able to access the transaction code audit or this permission. So just be mindful of that this may require additional escalation to your accounting or management team. So with this transaction code audit, what we're looking at is actually reviewing the settings or the setup of the GL accounts or general ledger accounts, transaction codes, and tax codes inside the database. Let's get started with the GL accounts, and you'll find these in the transaction codes module. So to access this module, like I said, you do need that permission set, but you'll find this module in system configuration and transaction codes. So this module opens up as a pop-up on screen, and you'll be able to go through the different auditing steps we'll look at here. Great. So when that transaction codes module opens up, you'll click the GL accounts tab, and that will show you a list of all of your general ledger accounts. What we want to look for first is any of your receivable accounts, those three main accounts that are marked as receivable here with the receivable check mark. Those three accounts should be the deposit holdings, AR guest, and AR city. These are the only accounts that should have that receivable checkbox. If you come across another account, like this one, for example, this is bike rentals, this is marked as receivable. This will cause balancing issues on your reporting. So we need to remove this checkbox. We cannot have any other accounts marked as receivable. So in order to remove this checkbox, you're going to click the Modify button. Then you can remove the checkmark and click OK. Next thing you're going to do is take a look at all of the transaction codes. So again, it's the same module, transaction codes module, but this time you'll click the codes tab. And within that codes tab, you'll see the accounts tab. So this is the account that is attached to the room charge code, RCH, in this database example. When we're looking at this account, this is exactly what we want to see. We have a single line item that tells us that when this charge is used, it will credit the room revenue account and it will debit the AR guest. If it's used in the city ledger, it will debit the AR city and it will credit the room revenue account again. So this can be a little bit confusing to look at or read if you're not used to working with general ledger accounts and transaction codes. But one thing that you can look for is if you find any accounts with a date to. This is going to cause an issue because if you have a transaction code with a date to, it means that that revenue stops crediting that or debiting those accounts as of that date. So if I was to use this transaction code after November 10th, I would have revenue that is recorded as a transaction, but I don't have any debits or credits or have anywhere to put that revenue. So it actually appears as unknown revenue in the database, and that can cause balancing issues. The other issue is if the account is missing altogether. So if you don't see any accounts attached to a transaction code, this means that you have unknown revenue occurring in the database. The transaction is recorded, but the revenue has no place to credit or debit. There's no attached GL account. So for the transaction codes, we've got, depending on the size of your database and how many things you charge towards guests, you may have quite a list here in the transaction codes. But you'll notice in the top right corner that we've got them categorized into groups. So we've got room charge codes, other charge, special codes, and payment codes. For each one of these cases, you'll go through and look at the accounts tab for each transaction code and review if they have any of those issues, if they have a date to, or if they're missing a GL account. The last part of the audit is taking a look at the tax codes, and it's very much the same as the transaction code component, where you'll click the taxes tab and take a look at the accounts tab. Here we have the account is set up correctly, but if you have an instance where you have a date to value appearing here, or if you have a missing GL account altogether, note those tax codes and any of these issues if you find issues with the GL, the transaction code, or tax code. Now, in many cases, if you have these issues occurring in your database on any of your transaction codes or tax codes, you will need to notify our support team in order for them to fix those issues for you. So at this point, we've kind of come to the end of troubleshooting. At this point, we do need to escalate. If you are still out of balance, you will need to contact our support team. You reach out via email or during regular office hours. Our support team will ask you for these questions in advance to ensure that you are addressing those first before any additional troubleshooting there. So they'll ask if you have overstayed, no-shows, or unbalanced folios. They'll also ask you which accounts are out of balance and what the out of balance values are, just so you can have that, just so that they can have that information as part of their tools to fix the issues. Now, in the event that our support team is not able to fix the issues, or if your database has been out of balance for longer periods of time, what we will recommend is that you purchase essential balancing training from our inside sales manager. You can contact her directly. Her information is on file here, and I will also include this in my follow-up email. You reach out to Margot, and she will help kind of assess where you're looking to get balance, and then she'll coordinate with our training team so that we can work with you one-on-one to bring your database back into balance. So now that we've kind of come to the end of our presentation, I just want to do a recap of the key parts of our presentation today. With essential balancing, we talked about what it is and why we do it. And then we talked about how to do those balance checks. So it is important that those balance checks are done every day, just depending on your front desk operations, whether it's a night auditor that's doing those balance checks within 30 minutes of the rollover time, or if it is an AM opening shift that is doing those balance checks within 30 minutes of opening the front desk. Now, that's all that needs to be done on a daily basis, but if there are ever an unbalancing issue found, these are the steps that you can take to resolve those, troubleshoot through any unknown issues, and then eventually escalate if needed to our support team. Awesome. So Francisco, was chiming in, letting me know that there is the ability to right-click and do an adjustment. So that was actually a really great thing to point out. I just want to take a moment to highlight that here. If I go back to the RoomKeyPMS database, so when you right-click and reverse a payment in order to refund it, it does disappear from this folio, and it will appear on folio 9. If you don't want it to disappear, what you can do instead is select Adjustment. And when it comes to refunding the amount, you'll refund the full amount. So $222.15, and we can just put this as example. So this time it did refund the full amount back to the Visa, but instead of disappearing and hiding on folio 9, it remains on the guest folio here, so the guest can see both the original payment and the reversal or the refund there. Okay, so it looks like we do not have any other outstanding questions. I'll go ahead and wrap up our presentation for today. You will receive a notification when the recording is made available on our support website. That's usually within about 24 hours. So if you were not able to join for the full presentation, definitely take a look at our recording tomorrow. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.